All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the What's Your Everest podcast. My name is Liam Hubbard. I'm a senior at Northwestern University studying human development and journalism, and I had the privilege of taking one of the university's most well known classes, Marriage 101, taught by Dr. Alexandra Solomon.
And I'm Dr. Carla Steingraber, a licensed clinical and sports psychologist, certified mental game coach, and author of 2 books, including Growth Mindset for Teens, which should be coming out very soon. I practice at Everest Strong Coaching in Northbrook, working with clients both in person and virtually.
Today, we're talking about loneliness, dating, and connection, and we could not ask for a better guide.
We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Dr. Solomon is an internationally recognized expert on relationships and the creator of the Relational Self Awareness Framework, which has reached millions. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, an adjunct professor at Northwestern, an award winning author, a masterclass instructor, and the host of the podcast Reimagining Love. Her books include Loving Bravely, Taking Sexy Back, and Love Every Day. And she's cultivated an engaged online community of more than 200,000 people.
So, Dr. Solomon, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to dive in. And let's start with the big picture. How would you describe the state of loneliness right now, especially for young people who are dating or hoping to date?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you both for having me on. I'm more than happy to be here. It's, never a good idea to play favorites among former students, but Liam is right up there as among the best of the best. I so
can imagine.
enjoyed our conversations and office hours. And I know that you're the breakout group leaders who had a chance to work with you in the small group part of the Marriage 101 experience also really appreciated everything that you brought to the class. So happy to reconnect.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Well, the state of loneliness is, we know it's an epidemic. We know that there are very significant health consequences of loneliness, not only emotional health consequences, but physical health consequences. And we know that that happens because we are like in the DNA of our very cells, we are social creatures. I think we spend so much time thinking about like the self, this like capital S self of who am I? But really, I believe that the self is inherently relational, that really we know ourselves through the relationships that we are in. And the best lives are the lives that are forever changed by relationships and changing relationships. So it's where the magic happens. And it's why I'm so incredibly passionate about helping all of us just be more open-hearted, courageous, and authentic in our relational lives. It matters. It matters tremendously.
Yeah, it really does. And I see this frequently with the clients that I work with as well. One thing that also comes up is that people often confuse being alone with being lonely.
Mhm.
From your perspective, how are those experiences different?
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction here because solitude is an element of emotional health as well. And solitude is, I choose to step away from the noise and the energy of relational life in order to cultivate my relationship with me. And that it is in solitude that we connect with our yearnings, our imagination, our hopes, our fears, and then we bring that back to our relational life. So I think of this like kind of figure eight or infinity symbol of intimacy and
Mhm.
solitude being really inextricably bound. But solitude is chosen space where loneliness is a craving. Loneliness is, I don't have the quality of connection or the amount of connection that I am craving. And you can be lonely and live under the same roof as somebody. And we know that that is a particularly acute kind of loneliness that I certainly
Mhm.
see in my couple therapy practice, is people who are
Yeah,
together and
that's a
maybe
big one.
laying next to somebody and feeling really lonely.
Yeah, just really unseen and disconnected.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And kind of a similar question for someone who's actively dating, how can they tell, maybe for any listeners out there, when loneliness is driving their choices rather than, say, genuine
Mm.
desire or compatibility?
Mhm.
It's I think that's a very thoughtful question. And I think one of the things that it speaks to is one of the kind of cultural problems that I spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about is the way in which we have somehow found ourselves in a situation where we elevate romantic connection above all other connection,
Mhm.
above friendship, above even sometimes family connection. We act as if like the romantic connection is the kind of end all be all, or the sort of peak of the triangle. And I think when there's that mindset, then I do think we're more primed to date from a place of desperation and need versus going into our dating lives with a really full set of connections. I think that we are there's actually Hinge, the dating app Hinge, has recently started an entire vertical around just helping people connect, like around shared activities and athletic activities. And it's not even really like a profit driven part of their business, as far as I understand it. It is just them recognizing that people are going to date better from a place of like solid ground when they feel like the rest of their life is really rich. They're going to bring a more interesting version of themselves to a date. They're going to bring a more engaged version of themselves to a date if they have other places where they feel connected. So I think that would be a check-in, is like how full do I feel elsewhere? And am I dating because I want this rather than because I need this? And there's no neat and tidy answers there, but I think that can be a check-in.
Mm, yeah.
I mean, this it brings up a really interesting point. And as far as I've seen in my practice, I mean, dating apps were supposed to make connection easier. And in the end, I see people being more discouraged than ever. They feel lonelier than ever. And in fact, I mean, there's this issue where people are swiping right or left based on very little data. Nobody's taking time to read the profile. And even if they do, the profile still doesn't tell you who the
Mm,
person really is.
mm,
So,
mm,
any thoughts on that about how you see dating apps shaping intimacy for better or worse?
Well, we know we need to hear from Liam on this one as a member of the generation. I mean, all generations are using dating apps. Older generations too.
Yeah.
But yes, that is certainly the case. What I really appreciate is that my college students have insight into this. They will come to office hours or share, in class. Like, I don't have much of a threshold for uncertainty, or I know that my distress tolerance or frustration tolerance is compromised. Like, I even in my friendships, the moment that a friend, disappoints me or frustrates me, my first go to is the urge to kind of cut the friendship. So I think that, and that is true for
Yeah.
all of us. And the part of the technology promises friction free, right? There are entire like people whose whole career is about user experience and design so that there's just frictionlessness and no extra steps and no wasted steps. So that's what technology promises us, but relationships
Mm.
actually promise us the exact opposite. And it is in the friction
Right.
where the good stuff happens, like sexual friction, emotional friction. Like,
Yeah.
you need to have some rub for stuff to feel good and to work. And that's how we really keep growing as people. So there's this like almost like paradoxical thing happening where we're getting pulled in this way by technology to seek friction free and ease, but relationships are over here like, yeah, that's not ever going to happen. Liam,
I mean,
what
the
are your
reality.
oh, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, that's such a good point with what you said at the end there. It's kind of this two things that are totally at odds, and dating companies are
Mm,
trying to really mesh those things together. And I think that with dating apps, from my experience of people that I know, it seems like it could be more useful for populations where dating options are not as readily
yeah.
accessible. Let's say you're in your late 30s or
Mm-hmm.
40s, or
Mm-hmm.
recently divorced, or whatever it is. Like, the dating pool is pretty small. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you are online, you kind of have this catered, you know, display of people who are available. Because if you're
Yep.
just walking around outside, most people will
Right.
be in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, have families, or whatever. It's pretty tricky. And when you go to the, the college age and the young 20s, I think that, you know, I kind of think it's a little detrimental in a lot of
Hmm.
ways because, especially in college, I mean, you are just surrounded by people
Yeah.
and opportunities to, date and find people. And I think that so much of our lives already with technology are kind of, you can have a experience sheltered in your home, whether it's watching
Yeah.
Netflix or, uh,
Ordering food.
ordering food. Exactly.
Hmm.
Like there's this commoditization of being able to do things
Yeah.
from this place of comfort.
Hmm.
And I think that the most valuable dating experiences come from being vulnerable and putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And when you show up to meet someone just off of, off of a swipe, it can feel really awkward,
Hmm.
because it's like, here's person
Well,
A,
and fake to some
person
extent,
B.
right? You haven't
Yeah,
actually connected.
right.
Hmm.
Now go ahead
Hmm.
and have a conversation.
Hmm.
So not to totally hate on dating apps. I know there are a
Mm-mm.
lot of success stories,
Yeah.
but I think there are definitely considerations to be
Mhm.
held there.
Yeah, we do in Marriage 101. I always do part of a lecture on like dating strategies, like how do you bring relational self-awareness to dating strategies? And that is one of them, is like your dating app is a tool. Like use the tool, but know that the dating app is trying to use you, right? It is trying to
Right.
optimize and profit off of your attention, your frustration, your upset, your rumination. So use the tool just to get you as far as that first date. Because as Carla's saying, right, you don't know anything. You can do the sort of best you
Mhm.
can do, but then you've got to get there in person and make some
Yeah.
magic.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And kind of continuing with your core idea of relational self awareness, how can you use this framework, whether it's online or in person, to date with more clarity and less fear?
Hmm. Hmm. I do think it starts with using the dating apps in the way that we're talking about, like really limited, knowing that and resisting the urge to act as if you can learn a person by
Mm.
stalking their socials and all of that. And in fact, what you end up doing when you're kind of stalking their social media and before you meet them is you're just filling your head with stories, and that creates more anxiety. So one of the things I love most is inviting people to really notice where their attention goes when they're on a date. And I think there's like three places your energy can go, or your attention. One is, some of us, I say us as if I've dated, I've been married for 27 plus years, but some of the people on a date, their energy is really focused on themselves. They feel like they're under a microscope and they're really self-conscious. And in other people, the spotlight or the microscope is on the other person. They're kind of like, almost like sitting there with their little checklist of, do they meet this
Mhm.
criteria? Do they meet this criteria? But the third place where attention can go is just to the space between the two of you. And that's where I really invite people to put their attention, because then you are present, and you're present to whatever is happening right here, right now. And you can only ever take 50% of responsibility for the dynamic that the two of you are creating together. And I think that's the most courageous way to go into a first date, especially, is just being present to that experience. Certainly not going to the bathroom and checking your swipes, in the bathroom, but just really being present with that person and letting that be a beginning, middle, and end right there. And that the goal of a first date is that you come away not with butterflies, not with fireworks, but just with kind of like a, huh, like what in psychology we call the study response, which is like, I'm curious to learn more. Like that's a sign of a really good first date, is you're left with some curiosity and some interest of like what might happen next.
Hmm, I love
Mhm.
that.
Hi, everyone. What's your Everest? We all have a mountain we're trying to climb. My book here, What's Your Everest? How to Win in Sports, Career, and Life While Enjoying the Ascent, is here to help you with your journey to the top while enjoying the climb. It's written for both teens and adults who are looking to grow, push themselves, and believe bigger. It's available on Amazon. And if you find this book is helpful to you, even with one step up the mountain, I'd truly be grateful for your review. Keep climbing. You've got this.
What about when somebody feels burned out, stuck, scared to try again after a painful breakup, or they've been trying the dating apps and they haven't really found any decent matches according to them? What's the healthiest
Mhm.
place for them to start rebuilding?
Yeah. It's so real that oftentimes there is a need to pause and reorient and heal after a breakup. The kind of common wisdom is the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else, and that can sort of be people's,
Yeah.
home remedy for a broken heart. But what we know about broken hearts is that the emotions are real, the grief is real. Actually, the grief is real even if you are the person who ended the relationship. I don't think we talk a lot
Right.
about how the person who ends a relationship also grieves, the wish that this relationship could have been other than what
Yeah.
it was.
Hmm.
So that need for time and care and feeling your way back into yourself, really nourishing the other kinds of connections. Um, and then sometimes you don't know until you try. Like I have known people who really thought they were ready to date again, and they go on a first date and they're completely overwhelmed or shut down. And then that's just data. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. That is oftentimes the only, unfortunately, there are just times in our life where we learn things the hard way. We learn we aren't ready by trying. So, and then in terms of just like the dating app burnout is really real. And so I really recommend that people continue to just keep their eyes up when they're out in the world, when they're in line at Starbucks. Like keep your phone in your pocket, like keep your eyes up, like that there are lots and lots of ways to meet people IRL. We
Yeah.
don't have to have apps to meet people. We can still, be friendly in public spaces. We can ask our friends to keep an eye out for people. Like,
Hmm.
like matchmaking still is a very, very common way that people meet each other.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable for listeners to hear because it can feel like such a monumental effort to get back
Hmm.
out there. And another thing with romance and love that you really can't avoid mentioning is pop culture. Like you mentioned, Dr. Solomon, at the start of the conversation, our culture puts romantic connection way up here, and
Yep.
everything else is, kind of falls below that. And pop culture sells us a lot of ideas about love, soulmates, instant
Mhm.
chemistry, the one,
Hmm.
happily ever after. Um, so, which of these narratives, or maybe some that I didn't mention, do you think are the most misleading or unhelpful for people who are, genuinely trying to build relationships?
Mm, there's so many to choose from. So many unhelpful narratives that make a hard thing harder. Yeah. That is, I mean, I think that one of the ones that I talk a lot about is that myth of instant chemistry. And I don't want anybody to be overriding really clear no's inside of their bodies, but I'm troubled when I hear people talking about like if the first time they hook up with a new partner it wasn't amazing, then they'll be like we just don't have
Hmm.
chemistry, when actually chemistry can take, it's really I mean sex, there's not very little on earth that makes us feel as vulnerable as sexual experiences do. And so it's wholly reasonable that it can take a little while to establish your groove with a new partner, to learn their body, to learn your own body with their body. So, this idea that if it isn't mind blowing the first time you're sexual, I'm not talking about penetrative sex necessarily, but just the first time you are sexual together, then forget it and cut your losses. I think I've heard so many like beautiful love stories over the years, but it is a little bit of a slow burn and a little bit of awkwardness and finding their way. And then when the couples reminisce on those first early awkward times, it's with like there's like a sweetness to that of like, yeah, it took us a
Hmm.
little while to, figure ourselves and each other out. So I think that one is one that I really invite people to shed, especially I think in the era where there's so much pornography available, and so much sex education for young people happens vis-a-vis pornography. So there's a lot of unlearning myths around sex to help people have more permission, more compassion, and more self-compassion.
Mhm.
Perhaps another myth is that there's any realism to pornography.
Sure.
So many people get their expectations from pornography, and then the real thing just somehow
Mhm.
falls a little short because
Mhm.
it's not as dramatic or exciting or what have you. And nobody rings the doorbell showing up in some kind of a costume.
Well, and I also think, Carla, that there's the other way this plays out is also true, that if your first education is, so much of pornography is really quite extreme these days. So I think
Mhm.
that there's a lot of, I don't think it's too dramatic to say a lot of like lowercase t trauma, or just like that. If we think
Yeah.
about what trauma is too much too soon without a framework for understanding something. If those are somebody's first experiences of sex, then the whole world of sex feels pretty freaking daunting and overwhelming and intense and almost frightening or confusing. So I think there's also that way that
Yeah.
that I think this generation is dealing with. Like, it is, yes, that mythology of like body parts don't always work the way that they work in porn, and yeah, setups aren't quite that way, but also this idea that sex can be a lot gentler
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
simpler
Mhm.
and than what we see in
Yeah.
mainstream pornography.
Yeah. If you could offer one practice that reliably helps people feel less lonely and more connected, whether they're single or partnered, is there anything that comes to mind?
Yes, and it is from maybe it's about a year ago now. Well, Carla, I know you remember, but Liam, I don't know if do you know who Dr. Ruth is? Dr. Ruth Westheimer?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
She
Oh,
passed
icon.
away. Yeah, she passed away a couple of years ago at like 90 something years old, and she was like the first public facing sex educator. She had a show called Ask Dr. Ruth, like in the
Mhm.
80s. I would put my Walkman in my ears and like hide under my blankets and listen to her. And she was a call-in radio show, and she was this little tiny Eastern European woman with this like beautiful accent, and she talked about sex like really unabashedly. For her, she was like really, really ahead of her time. And
Yeah.
anyways, she wrote many books she wrote 40 plus books over her career. And her last book she wrote was called The Joy of Connection. And she wrote it with a woman named Allison Gilbert, who is a journalist. And Allison's probably my age. So there's a generational difference. And they built this beautiful friendship as they were working on The Joy of Connection, because Dr. Ruth really wanted to heal the loneliness epidemic. And she said, my whole career, I wanted to study loneliness, but I had to help women have orgasms first, then help
Mm.
out with the loneliness problem. So,
Mhm.
in one of the stories that Allison shared with me when I was interviewing her, is that when she and Dr. Ruth would meet to work on the book, at the end of a visit, Dr. Ruth would grab her hands and say, Allison, when do I get to see you again?
Mm.
And I really took that to heart as something that I think would help
Mhm.
us in the loneliness epidemic. If we let the people know, because when you say, when do I get to see you again? It says, I enjoyed our time together. You matter to me. I want to keep this going. And I'm taking the risk of making the first bid for seeing you again,
Yeah.
continuing this.
Yeah.
So I think if we all did that, like just took the risk to initiate and then follow through, right? Because we're also in an era of kind of flaking out on each
For
other,
sure.
which does not help. So I think those would be two practices.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that
It's a
phrase.
really interesting point. Yeah, because so often people are so worried about being the first one to
Yes.
demonstrate some affection. And really, it's such a brave thing and such a gift you're giving somebody, whether they reciprocate or not. But you are giving them this affirmation that you actually like them, are interested in them,
Mm.
care about them, whatever it might be. And yeah, we can reframe it to being such a gift, something you're
Yep.
doing for somebody.
And social science research shows that we like people who like us.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all pretty narcissistic. So when you
Yeah,
let somebody know I like you, it's going to make them like you more.
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Dr. Solomon, we love to end with the question of what's your Everest? What challenge, aspiration, or personal summit are you climbing right now?
Oh, um, well, Well, I would say that my Everest right now is really like remembering that I am a whole person and a person who really enjoys rest and who has lots and lots of interests that are beyond my career and my family, because those are kind of like my two go-tos. But I actually have lots of things that I like cooking and crafts, and there's just these things that I really enjoy that have atrophied for me a bit. We are
Mm.
relatively new empty nesters, and I have got, as Liam knows, the pedal to the metal around my career. I'm really ambitious. That's me, but that's not all of me. So my Everest right now is how do I hold more space for things that are more
Yeah.
playful and less purposeful.
Hmm. I love
Yeah.
that. More
That's hard to
playful,
do.
purposeful. Well, Dr. Solomon, thank you so much for taking your valuable time to hop
Yeah.
on the show today. I really hope that our listeners can take away some lessons. I know for me personally, your work and your class Marriage 101 have had a honestly, it's really not an exaggeration to say a life-changing impact. I
Mm.
mean, I was on the phone yesterday with a friend, just giving some advice on some romantic stuff, and I was like, she was like, "Wow, that's a really cool comment. Where'd you get that?" I was like, "Oh, Marriage 101 that I took at Northwestern. I got your book on my psychology bookshelf right over to my left." So thank you for your time and your
Mm.
insight. It was really a gift.
That means a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Liam.
you very much.
Absolutely. It was fun to be with both of you.